Committee Chair Dominguez, you are streaming.
Thank you, Mr. Gonzalez. Welcome to our audience and to our members and Superintendent Blakey. I would like to call this meeting to order. Dr. Albright, may I have a roll call, please?
Janelle Estorga.
Here.
Ronaldo Tomorito. I see her iPhone on the screen. Heather Benavides.
Here.
Courtney Jackson.
Here.
Josefina Dominguez.
Here. And I do believe she will join us. She's traveling, and so I know reception may be an issue. Tonight we have a very full agenda, and so by necessity, we will probably extend our meeting time beyond an hour. The last item on the agenda is the APS governance manual edits that an ad hoc committee completed for the policy committee to review and discuss. The governance manual is an important document. It should, by the very nature of its democratically elected school board members, reflect the vision and values of constituents. And it should also reflect the tone and tenor of the discourse and behavior the community expects from us. And so I urge you to stay with us this evening or revisit this recorded session to hear the conversation on the governance manual edits, to see if in fact we are reflecting what you, the public, expect from us. But first, we're going to begin with our first item for consideration and action, and that is the adoption of the February 3rd, 2025 Policy Committee meeting agenda. May I have a motion, please?
I move to adopt the February 3rd, 2025 Policy Committee meeting agenda. This is Board Member Benavides.
May I have a second?
I second Ronaldo Board Member Tomorito.
Thank you. Glad you could join us. May we have a roll call vote, please, Dr. Albright?
Janelle Estorga.
Yes.
Ronaldo Tomorito.
Yes.
Heather Benavides.
Yes.
Courtney Jackson.
Yes.
Josefina Dominguez.
Yes. Our next item for consideration and action is to approve the minutes from the Policy Committee meeting on January 13th, 2025. May I ask for a motion, please, and a second?
I move we approve the minutes from the Policy Committee meeting on January 13th, 2025. This is Board Member Jackson.
And I will second. This is Board Member Benavides.
May we have a roll call vote, please, Dr. Albright?
Janelle Estorga.
Yes.
Ronaldo Tomorito.
Yes.
Heather Benavides.
Actually, I'm so sorry. I just remembered something. I am not present on the roll call for the meeting of January 13th.
Thank you. We will make that correction.
Okay, sorry. I knew there was something. I apologize.
With that correction, I think we probably need to have an amendment to the motion.
I amend my motion to approve the minutes from the Policy Committee meeting on January 13th, 2025, with the addition of Board Member Benavides as present at the meeting. Is that where the discrepancy was?
Yes.
Okay.
And I will second.
Janelle Estorga.
Yes.
Ronaldo Tomorito.
Yes.
Heather Benavides.
Yes.
Courtney Jackson.
Yes.
Josefina Dominguez.
Yes. Our next item for consideration and action is archiving administrative board policy IM, teaching about controversial or sensitive issues. And our presenters are board members Jackson and Benavides. Oh, but I guess I think we can go ahead and motion for action. and do a second.
Well,
Um,
Chair Dominguez, it
Yeah.
is your meeting, your policy committee, and so Board Member Jackson and I discussed this earlier, and we can go through each one, 4.1 through 4.7 individually if you'd like, and explain our process and explain the change or archival or whatever the case may be. Or if everybody's already reviewed them, then we can just move on to,
Move to action.
yeah, unless Board Member Jackson disagrees and has something she wants to add.
Yes, I agree with Board Member Benavides on that cause of action. The only one that I would like to pull out for a little bit more discussion is 4.5, which is approval of revisions to board policy, the naming and renaming. So if the committee is okay, we can move to approve 4.1, 4.2, 4.3, 4.4, and 4.6.
So I'm gonna interject here a little bit. So I'd like to suggest a friendly amendment to that. There is a suggested amendment to KB1 that Board Member Tom Morito would like to make. And so how about if we approve 4.1 and 4.2 with the understanding for the public that 4.1 and 4.2 have been pretty much, and correct me if I'm wrong, Policy Diet Committee members, but they get addressed in 4.3. Is that correct? And so we'll have a discussion for 4.3, but I think we can move. So how about if I step back and I say, our next item for consideration and action is to archive Administrative Board Policy IM teaching about controversial or sensitive issues, and 4.2 archiving Administrative Board Policy KB Family and Community Engagement, and with the understanding that we'll clarify those two in 4.3. Anybody want to try that motion?
I think what you're doing in the spirit of efficiency makes sense, but I don't think that we can cram them all together
Okay,
because even though they essentially were all placed in or show up in KB1, I don't know that individually we cannot address them or address them in 4.3 because that's not how they're listed on the agenda, but I could be wrong. I mean, in the
Right.
time that we're taking discussing
So-
it, we could just be going through them, so.
so let's just go back to the original motion or request for a motion to consider archiving Administrative Board Policy IM teaching about controversial or sensitive issues. Could I have a motion and a second on that?
Okay, so I move to archive Administrative Board Policy IM teaching about controversial or sensitive issues.
And I will second that motion.
And we are ready for a roll call vote.
You need to call for discussion first.
Oh, well, do we need a discussion? And I see no one. And so may we please have a roll call vote?
Janelle Astorga,
Yes.
Ronaldo Tomorito,
Yes.
Heather Benavides,
Yes.
Courtney Jackson,
Yes.
Josefina Dominguez.
Yes. Our next item for consideration and action is to consider archiving Administrative Board Policy KB, Family and Community Engagement. I'd like a motion and a second, please.
I move that we archive Administrative Board Policy KB, Family and Community Engagement. This is Board Member Benavides.
And I will second. This is Board Member Jackson.
Is there a discussion?
Yes.
so Board Member Tom Morito, I don't know if you heard it correctly, but this is just the archiving of KB, and it's not the discussion of KB 1.
Okay, okay. Sorry.
That's
I'm
okay.
I'm almost to Cuba.
We understand it's a little bit unwieldy for you.
I know.
I have a
Yes.
discussion question, Chair Dominguez.
Okay,
Was this community engagement policy the one created by community members?
Hmm.
The KB Family and Community Engagement Policy.
Yes, because I know Families United for Education helped create a family engagement policy, and I wouldn't feel comfortable archiving a policy that was created by community.
Looking at the document, this one was first created in 1990. So if that's when they
And-
participated, it's been updated.
The last revision was 2016.
Yeah.
Board Member Tomorito, do you remember when FLE did the family engagement policy? I just want to make sure before I move on.
While she's getting on, Board Member Astorga, most of this language that is in KB has been incorporated over into KB1. So the policy is just being archived, but the language that's included in here has just been basically transported over to KB1.
Okay. Thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
and so, Board Member Astorga, are you comfortable moving forward?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so we got a motion. Did we get a second?
We did.
Yes.
Okay, and so are there any other questions? If not, then let's go for a roll call vote, please.
Janelle Astorga,
Yes.
Ronaldo Tomorito,
Yes.
Heather Benavides,
Yes.
Courtney Jackson,
Yes.
Josefina Dominguez.
Yes. Our next item for consideration and action is to consider approving the approval of revisions to Board Policy KB1, Student and Parent Guardian Rights and Responsibilities. And let's see. I'm going to suggest that we go through a discussion first, before asking for a motion and ending up with an amended motion. Is that okay with everyone here?
I mean, I would prefer that we stick with the same process that we've been doing with the others, so.
Okay. So we'll end up with an amended motion. So may I have a motion and a second, please?
I move that we approve the revisions to Board Policy KB1, Student and Parent and Guardian Rights and Responsibilities Policy. This is Board Member Jackson.
And I will second. This is Board Member Benavides.
Is there a discussion? And I'm going to prompt Board Member Tomorito because I know she had something that
I'm
she
here.
submitted.
I'm here.
Okay,
I'd like to insert a statement or just KB1 policy shall not conflict or supersede the procedural safeguards, parent rights outlined in the Individual Disability Act IDA. The reason for saying so is when I read the parent rights piece, I don't want it in especially for parents with disabilities to feel that that is their primary rights, but they should follow the IDA procedural safeguards first before those. It's confusing.
And do you remember where you wanted to insert that language? And I do believe, I think I sent that language in on January 22nd to our Board of Education Services staff, just so that you would have it on hand.
I think it was gonna be highlighted somewhere either right underneath, because I don't want parents to be confused once reading that they could also go to, if they had children with disabilities, they could go to the IDA procedural safeguards, and we could provide a link for that.
A hyperlink,
Yes.
okay? And so, correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember the discussion being, inserting that sentence, that language after the first sentence. So it would read, the Board of Education will determine the names of school. Boy, is that it? I'm looking at the wrong one.
Yeah, I think it starts, the Albuquerque Public Schools APS Board of Education believes the child's successful education is the result of a collaborative effort among parents, guardians, individuals with caregiver authorization, students, and school staff.
And then it was this, I think it was the second. Oh, it was the third. It would have been the third. It would be the third sentence. After, to support this shared effort, we recognize each party in this partnership has rights and responsibilities to promote. Is that it?
Academic success, yeah. And then there's
More language.
Right.
But I think it would be, if I recollect our conversation, and it's been a while, it would be the third sentence then.
All right, we don't have that in front of us, so can you slowly read it again?
Yes. KB1 policy shall not conflict with or supersede the procedural safeguards, and then in parentheses, parents' rights, outlined in the Individual with Disabilities Act, and then in parentheses, IDEA, and we would hyperlink procedural safeguards, which would take you to, remind me.
The New Mexico Special Education procedural safeguard link.
So I think that we don't need to put KB1. I think we should just put this policy because we're in
Yeah,
KB1.
that would work.
That would be
Okay.
redundant.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Okay. So it'd be, instead of KB1, this policy
Mhm.
shall, okay.
Well, that's how it should start.
Right, correct.
Mhm.
Yeah. I agree, Ronaldo.
Any other board members?
Is there a sense that this policy is superseding?
It's confusing to parents, and I only can say that if we're not instructing parents on their procedural safeguard rights, and they see that particular area when it's reflected in their IEPs, that they would take that as the procedural safeguard instead of realizing you can go to the New Mexico Special Education procedural safeguards. And the only reason I'm stating that is when Casey presented on December 18th, I asked about training parents on those procedural safeguard rights. She didn't really answer me, and I'm afraid that those parents will not be trained. So we're going to have this issue of where do they go and how they perceive their rights. Or it's going to create confusion.
Go ahead.
Is there a like down at the bottom of the document, is there a policy cross reference or a procedural directives cross reference that needs to be inserted.
Yeah, it's not
But-
there.
It's not,
I don't think so. Let me see. No, we have non-discrimination, goals, family community engagement, release of student information, student records, teaching about controversial sensitive issues, student attendance, and then procedural directive, handbook, negotiated agreement, attendance, inquiries regarding student information, non-discrimination for students, gender identity and expression, and then parental concerns about instructional materials.
and then legal references.
See?
I don't think we want to bury this.
No, I'm just,
We're just, yeah, I don't see it in the
Right.
legal references either.
Right.
I wish we had had this language prior to this discussion, just so that we're not trying to figure this out on the fly. So it sounds like there needs to be a legal reference potentially to IDEA in this document.
Yes.
And does that is that in addition to the legal reference that is listing FERPA?
No,
And
it's separate.
it's separate from FERPA.
Yes.
Okay. And just asking questions here. Has that language, was that language like given to like legal? Has that been run through
Mhm.
legal, that particular language and the particular references?
I only can tell you that when I first went to my first New Mexico School Board Association conference, I did reference and question that. And they didn't know how to answer me.
Sorry, who's they?
The law firm, they do all presentations for us at the Mexico School.
I think,
But I didn't formally introduce it to attorneys.
I think you're referring to internal legal, correct? Courtney?
yeah,
Yes.
board,
Yes.
board member
Board member
Tom
Jackson.
Morito, we're referring to internal. But that's why we submitted this language back on January 22nd.
No,
So,
I just didn't want, I didn't take it to
no, and
legal.
right.
I just thought it was language to be inserted because it's part of federal law.
Yeah, no, I think that's just my question. I'm not saying, I'm not arguing against the insertion. I'm just wanting to make sure that because the special education department is such a very specific set of rules. I just want to
Yeah.
make sure that anything that we're inserting into what would be a policy is in alignment with it's just in alignment with statute and law.
Not
So
conflicting.
right, thank you. So I mean, I think I would be okay with that insertion, with the caveat that maybe before it is brought to the board for a full vote, that it would need a full legal review.
Right.
That's fine. I just, I'm fine with that. I just want to make sure that when I first saw the KB1 policy, I was a little confused only because my special education background.
Mhm. Yeah. No,
Okay.
we appreciate the addition.
So yeah, I'm fine taking it to legal review.
Board Chair Dominguez,
Yes.
Linda's is on the call with us if you want to talk with him or have him
Okay.
join the conversation.
There he is.
Okay. So could
Yes,
we
sorry.
send, so good evening.
Good evening.
Mr. Menendez.
Madam
Do
Chair,
you have-
I've heard the discussion, and initially I'm okay. I agree, we'll give it another look, a careful review. But initially, I think putting the language in and having a legal reference to the IDEA is okay.
Okay, good. So, so do you agree that this can happen before this moves forward to the consent calendar on Wednesday? Mr. Melendez?
I can try.
And actually, will this meet, will this meet the Open Meetings Act?
Madam Chair, we wouldn't be able to get it to the full board with 72 hours. So it would have to go to the next board meeting with any changes.
Okay,
And Madam Chair, all of the items that you're taking action on tonight will actually be on the consent calendar for the March 5th
for
board meeting.
March.
And that
Okay.
we do have time to have legal review before that's completed.
Perfect. So we're not in conflict with the consent calendar on the 5th of February.
No, it's not on that agenda. It's on the next one.
Okay, so I need to know where everyone stands. I think we've got a majority who is in agreement with inserting this language. This would be the third, I believe it would be the third sentence. And are we good?
Starting with this policy. Can take out-
Correct.
Yes.
And I'm sorry, can you just read it to me? Read it one more time, just.
Yes. It would read, this policy shall not conflict with or supersede the procedural safeguards, quotation marks, parents' rights outlined in the Individual with Disabilities Act, in parentheses, IDEA, period. And I said quotation marks, I meant parentheses, parents' rights.
Okay. Even though, and I'm just playing devil's advocate here, even though the whole policy says that we will follow all federal laws, do we still feel like the overarching policy is that we will follow all federal laws to include IDEA?
I just know based on my review and seeing it, there was confusion. And that's the only reason why I brought this up, because I don't want parents to follow this parent rights policy and not thinking that they have their own. Because within the IEP, it talks about their parent rights, but there's not in any way anything deferring or bringing them to the actual IDEA policy or IDEA, the Individual Disability Act. So it was creating confusion.
Because this policy was being presented at IEPs?
No, it's just it's the context or the wording of parent rights that's being used in KB1. And then so many times parent rights under IDEA is referred to parent rights. And then if you get more into studying it, you realize it's procedural safeguards.
Okay.
So I think more than anything, it's just a way to alert parents again in another area that these are their rights. and this is available, and review this law. You know, just putting all the
you.
information out there.
Yep.
I see Mr. Melinder shaking his head up and down. Are you signaling something
He's
to me,
good.
Mr. Melendres?
I'm adding yes. I agree with
Okay,
Board Member
Good.
Benavides.
Okay, thank you.
all right, so if we may, I think this requires an amendment to the motion.
Oh, okay, so I will amend, hold on. I amend my motion to approve the revisions to board policy KB1 student and parent guardian rights and responsibilities to include the language as discussed, as well as the legal references discussed.
Yeah.
I'll
Second,
second.
thank you. And roll call vote, please. Dr. Albright?
Janelle Astorga,
Yes.
thank you. Ronaldo Tomorito,
Yes.
Heather Benavides,
Yes.
Courtney Jackson,
Yes.
Josefina Dominguez.
Yes. Our next item for consideration and action is to consider approval of revisions to board policy AD tobacco-free schools and presenters. Do you want to present board members Courtney Jackson and Heather Benavides? Well, I'll ask for a motion in a second first.
I move that we approve the revisions to board policy AD tobacco-free schools. This is Board Member Benavides.
I'll second this as Board Member Jackson.
Is there a discussion? Or a need for discussion? If not, then I'm going to ask for a roll call vote.
Janelle Astorga,
Yes.
Ronaldo Tomorito,
Yes.
Heather Benavides,
Yes.
Courtney Jackson,
Yes.
Josefina Dominguez.
Yes. Next item for consideration and action is to consider approval of revisions to the board policy FE, naming, renaming, and dedication of facilities. May I have a motion and a second before we discuss?
I move that we approve revisions to board policy FE, naming, renaming, and dedication of facilities. This is Board Member Benavides.
Yeah, I will second to bring it to discussion.
Okay, and so we are at discussion.
Okay, so this policy, there were some concerns that were brought to me regarding this policy about the naming and renaming of schools. Most significantly that just a focus on the fact that our responsibility as board members is to focus on student outcomes and to not be, spending our time on other things that can distract us from what our main goal is, which is to monitor and make sure that our students are making progress towards goals. There was a question as to why this policy came back. The original policy diet committee had actually sent this to the administration and deemed it as an administration responsibility, but it since came back with the second round of policy diet that Board Member Benavides and I participated in. So there's a question as to why it came back to the board after it had been archived. And then I think finally there's kind of a question as to whether or not the board really needs to be involved in this, especially when there is a procedural directive that's attached to this policy that has pretty substantive community engagement involved in the naming or the renaming of buildings. So I think I just want to kind of bring this to the policy committee to have a discussion as to whether or not this is our role as board members. Do we really need to be participating in this? Or is this something that falls within the administration, especially given the pretty substantive community engagement requirements that are in the procedural directive? So those are kind of the main questions that I think need to just be discussed before we just move this along through consent.
So I have a quick question about when it was last reviewed. Because in the policy, it looks like it was last reviewed on November 11th of 2014 and then revised November 18th of 2015. But you did state that it was considered in the last policy diet. And so what happened? And I assume that would be reflected here, and unless maybe no changes were made and it was just kind of in limbo.
Yeah, board member Benavides, that's my understanding that's what happened. Is the first set of policy diet where they went through the huge stack occurred. Okay, what year are we in? 2023. So maybe 2023 is when the first big stack went through, and when they, ranked everything. And I think because it fell into that huge stack, it just was archived over to administration. Because it was, sorry, I guess I shouldn't say archived, it was sent over to administration, but no action was taken on it, which is why I think you don't see that there's like a reviewed and a revised. It was just kind of in limbo over there. Then when administration, and Dr. Blakey, correct me if I'm incorrect on this, but once administration was able to kind of get to the stack that had been delegated to them, when they got to this one, it was reversed back to us, and that's how it ended up in front of you and I.
Okay.
Was that, she's shaking her head, I think.
Yes, yes. It was under the previous administration, but I was there, so I remember it came, and then the administration felt like it was a board policy, so it went back to the ad hoc, which I believe was a new ad hoc, to look at it because the administration felt like it should be still considered a board policy.
You walk us through those reasons, please?
Sure. So some of the reasons that it was considered that the administration felt it should still be a board policy is because renaming a school or naming a school from the beginning reflects the voice and the values of the community. So the school names particularly are connected to, in the procedural directive, it actually starts in the community as far as renaming a school or naming a school. I think that there was a lot of discussion also around the board's responsibility of financing new buildings. So the board in bond elections and in any other type of funding approves funding for new schools. So it was connected to, if a new school is being built, the financial responsibility of the board was connected to the naming of the school. And there's also money attached if a school is to be renamed. The board then would have to authorize the amount of money to rename a school, like new marquees, new logos, it's a very expensive process. So it wasn't seen that the administration making a decision on renaming would then put the board into a position to have to fund it. And I think the other part is the accountability of the procedural directive to listen to the voice of the community. So if a board does receive a name of a school, to either be renamed or to be named from the beginning of a school, that there is a responsibility of the board to verify that the administration has followed the procedural directive to involve the community, because the procedural directive doesn't have a policy attached to it, so there isn't ownership on making sure that the community was involved in the naming of a school.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions? Any more questions, comments?
I have a question,
Okay,
and
board member?
you'll have to forgive me for putting you on the spot, Dr. Blakey, but does the administration still share those same concerns for the renaming of a school and would like to see it be a board responsibility or remain with the board?
I think that yes, I do think that the administration still does want it to be a board policy. We do have a new school, as you all know, the international school that will be coming up for naming, and it does feel disconnected to the board if the administration just decides names of schools without the board approval of it. The procedural directive does outline that the board doesn't ask for a school to be renamed. So I think that I could see the other view of you don't want a board member just like renaming every school in their district to be named after them. So I do think that the procedural directive is important to follow because it does have a lot of community engagement, but I do think that there should be oversight of the board to verify that the administration has followed the process of community involvement in naming a school.
I agree with that, and I think it would be pretty incredible if a board member wanted to change the name of a school to their own name, because they can't be named after anybody who's still alive. So that would involve some real interesting measures. But thank you for your input.
Okay, any other comments or observations? Because if not, I'm going to ask for a roll call vote. And Dr. Albright, I think we're ready for that.
Really quickly, Board Member Jackson, do you have any other input as how do you feel about this?
You know, I keep going, I'm like torn, right? Because I keep going back to when we started the whole student outcomes focused governance process. I remember reading in our documents that very stringently that our job is to focus on student outcomes. And then there's like a paragraph of it's not to make parents happy. It's not to have happy teachers. It's not to name buildings. It's not to do. And let me state, those are actually the words that come out of this document. It's not my personal. I do want parents to be happy. Let me just state that if anybody's listening, I do want happy teachers. But I think the point that was being made in that document that we read when we were first being trained on this is we have to focus on what's most important, and getting into, naming of buildings and, spending our time showering accolades at board meetings which is what we used to do, is not a good use of our time. And so I'm very much on the fence about it because there were, and here's why, because there was another issue that was brought up like a year ago that I made a public statement about, that we are supposed to be focusing on student outcomes during meetings. And so I voted against a particular addition to our agenda because I felt so strongly about the fact that as soon as we start veering away from what our focus is, I'm afraid that it's going to open a Pandora's box. So I can completely understand the desire to keep the main thing the main thing. And so I think in this instance, I'm going to probably stick with my original feeling of, what I read in that paragraph that really resonated with me. So I think that's my argument for that, is I just want to make sure that we're not letting in extra things that can divert us from what our real mission is. But I do want happy parents and I do want happy teachers. Again, for the record.
Well, and theoretically, this won't come up very often if it does remain with the board. So I think that that's helpful in remaining focused on our goals.
True. True.
Okay, so thank you for clarifying your position, Board Member Jackson, and thank you for encouraging that clarification, Board Member Benavides. Anybody else? If not, then I think we're ready for a roll call vote. Dr. Albright?
Janelle Astorga,
Yes.
Ronaldo Tomorito,
Yes.
Heather Benavides,
Yes.
Courtney Jackson,
No.
Josefina Dominguez.
Yes. Our next item for consideration and action is to consider approval of revisions to Board Policy IH Instructional Program. May I have a motion and a second before we discuss?
I
4.6.
move to approve revisions to Board Policy IH Instructional Program. This is Board Member Jackson.
And I will second. This is Board Member Benavides.
And is there discussion on this item? Hearing no desire for discussion, I'm going to ask for a roll call vote, please. Dr. Albright?
Janelle Astorga,
Yes.
Ronaldo Tomorito,
Yes.
Heather Benavides,
Yes.
Courtney Jackson,
Yes.
Josefina Dominguez.
Yes. Our next item for consideration and action, we're on 4.7, and that is to consider approval of revisions to Board Policy IK, Academic Accountability. May I have a motion and a second, please?
I move that we approve the revisions to Board Policy IK, Academic Accountability, Board Member Benavides.
I'll second Board Member Jackson.
Is there discussion?
I have a quick question, Chair Dominguez, and for the Policy Diet Committee. I was just wondering if we explicitly say the outcomes of our goals, like early literacy, math proficiency, post-secondary readiness, and skills, habits, and mindsets, would that hurt anything going into the future if our goals change, since those are our goals now?
I mean, I think it could require revision going
Right.
forward. But I don't think that that's a bad thing that you would need to require revision going forward. It's, it's an academic accountability policy. And personally, I don't think it's a bad thing to hold yourself accountable every few years. So yes, I think it is very specific to the goals that we have now. But if it would require revision, I think that's an easy change.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Any other questions or observations, comments? Hearing none. Dr. Albright, could you please do a roll call vote?
Janelle Astorga,
Yes.
Ronaldo Tomorito,
Yes.
Heather Benavides,
Yes.
Courtney Jackson,
Yes.
Josefina Dominguez.
Yes. Item 4.8, next item for consideration and action is to consider approval of the addition of section 4R, request for information policy and process to the APS Board of Education Governance Manual. May I ask for a motion and a second? However, I suspect there are going to be amendments. Do we want to motion and second or go to a discussion
I think
first?
to stay consistent, I will move that we approve the addition of section 4R, request for information, policy and process to the APS Board of Education Governance Manual. This is Board Member Benavides.
And I will second Board Member Jackson.
Okay, we are open for discussion. Yes, Board Member Jackson.
So I did submit some, sorry, I'm trying to find, I did submit some revisions through the, there they are, through the policy committee Q&As.
Mm-hmm.
The first one being, and again, I realized that we already did discuss some of these changes, but because there wasn't an official vote on them or an amendment, the changes were not made from our last
Right.
discussion. So just going back through those, to start, the first thing is that we need to make sure that wherever it says readily available in the first section, that we change wherever it says readily available to readily accessible.
Accessible. And I'm going to, I think we should check in with our policy analyst as we speak to make sure we're recording these.
Okay.
Didn't we already agree to this at the last policy meeting?
We did, but they weren't recorded because we didn't officially vote on it.
Okay.
Madam Chair, Member Jackson, I believe this language is included in the action memo.
Is it?
You're correct, because it wasn't voted on, we didn't include it in the document, but we did include it in the action memo.
The action memo.
Okay.
Let me.
Oh, yes,
get
you're
there
right.
too.
I apologize, Joanna. It's there.
Okay. Okay, so then I don't need to at least review the stuff that's in the action memo.
Let me.
Right. It'll just be incorporated by osmosis.
If the committee so chooses, we can add it, but since it wasn't voted on, we couldn't add it in advance of this meeting.
Got it. Okay.
So
Okay.
is there a line language?
So then I won't belabor the points, the 2 points that I had already included in the Q&A, but getting to that third section, I believe in the action memo, it said that we were going to, there was a discussion to leave it, to leave number 7 there, which included the media, under requests from constituents for the media. I don't know if this was discussed or not, but as I was reading through the document, I just really want to make sure that, first of all, references to the media are actually elsewhere in the governance manual. And it seems like this request for information policy is more about board member requests from us to the district and us amongst each other, and not necessarily requests with the media. Like, it's more of an internal discussion and not necessarily an external discussion. So I don't think that the number 7 that includes the media actually needs to be in there because it's elsewhere in the governance manual.
So does that mean we should take out requests from constituents, community members, elected officials, and the media. It is struck out on the example, but unless it's.
I think
Because
it
if
was
it's just internal,
original.
then it seems like that entire section should be removed.
That's what I think too. I think that whole section should be removed.
So
And-
remind me of the conversation that led to that, because when we were organizing the request for information, what struck us was in researching language is that requests for information seem to divide themselves up in these three categories. And so we do get requests. So they were not only internal and among or between board members, but requests for information from from constituents, community members, elected officials, and media for that matter. Because some of us do get requests, right? So I'm just thinking back to last year, community engagement. And this usually went through communications, but requests from the Spanish language stations for me to present information.
So the title, Board Requests for Information Process. What does board requests, what define board? Does that mean board members are requesting the information? Or is this request for information from the board? Because if it's just internal, then
Right.
and we're defining it.
And so again, you know, when we were doing the research for this section for requests for information, I'm just clarifying that the language that we found from a variety of sources seemed to divide itself up into these three categories.
Mhm.
So not just the board's request for information, but it would, I would say it'd be more generic requests for information. And then it would go into, you know, 4R, the first section there, communications between board members and staff and requests for information. And then the second section was board member to board member. And then finally, the third section would be represented by requests from community entities to the board.
So if I may clarify or request, what is the intent of this policy? Is the intent of this policy to outline how the board, us as individuals, go to the district and request information? Or is it the intent to be how the board handles all requests for information? Because my understanding was that this policy was more, how do individual board members go to the district to request information, especially, you know, given the first statement where it says that, you know, we require accurate and timely information. How do we go about getting that? So my understanding with this was more our internal process as to how we receive information from the district. If that's the case, then I don't think that that last section needs to be in this 4R policy, because it can either be placed over in 4P under the community engagement section. And as well with the media section in particular, it's elsewhere in the board in the governance manual. So I think we need to determine what is the intent, what was the original intent of this policy being developed, and are we maintaining what that intent was?
I will also jump into and say that I agree with Board Member Jackson. I believe that that was our discussion last meeting, and that's why we decided to move that section to 4P. And I also wanted to ask Board Member Jackson, do you know where in the governance manual it talks about media?
I knew you were going to ask me that question, and I can't. It's like, I know I've read it. I actually think it's not in our current governance manual. It's in one of the amendments that we're going to be discussing on Wednesday. I'm pretty sure that it's listed under like the officer roles.
That's why I remember seeing it as well.
Yeah, so it's like, I guess I shouldn't say it's in the governance manual, it's in potential amendments that we have coming for the governance manual. So, you know, what's the intent? Is it, how do we act amongst ourselves when we need information?
I think you're right. We decided that the very last section was covered in 4P, as well as I think maybe 4H. And that left two sections then, or two categories. How board members request information of the district, and how we request information of each other. And I think those two are covered. Is that correct?
Yes.
If we strike the final.
Yes.
So I have one addition or one suggested amendment. If we're finished understanding all that.
For that, yes. And I have one more potential amendment,
Okay.
but I will
Go ahead.
reserve it
Yeah.
until you're okay.
Yeah, go
So
ahead.
the only thing, and I realized this in the middle of the night, because this is how I like process things, apparently, is in my dreams. One potential, if I could pull it up. Darn it. Sorry, I made a note in my document. Now I can't get it. Sorry, go to you while I try to get this little document pulled up.
Before we move on to your new amendment, Chair Dominguez, can I just say something on what we were talking about?
Yes.
So I am reading the document that's on our next for our agenda, where it says in board roles or whatever, I believe it's H. The president represents the board to outside parties, including the media, by announcing board stated positions and communicating decisions within their delegated authority. So I think this is where we're seeing that. My only concern with that and not having something else for the media is by something that you brought up, Chair Dominguez, is we get asked a lot by Spanish media to do interviews. So I definitely would want us to start thinking about now, because I know we're going to go to this in the next discussion, but how we could include other board members or what the process is, because I still get asked a lot of that, and I want to make sure that that process is included in these documents.
I agree. Yes. Thank you. And so are you suggesting, Board Member Astorga, that we we flag that theme, that topic for the next discussion item.
Yes.
Okay.
If I could ask really quickly, what would be the suggestion though? That there would be an exception for Spanish language inquiries. And so those board members would have an exception to speak to whatever media outlet asked the question, or that it was addressed through the board president to the Spanish language media outlet.
I would say something more general, just in case the president is not available for media. Maybe something like the process, like we talked to the board president and is approved by her that there is another board member who will speak on behalf of the board or something like that. But I don't think it should just be for Spanish media.
Right.
Because I know
Yeah,
that
we'd have to address all languages, I think.
I was
Right.
gonna say, there's a free speech, I mean, one of the questions that I submitted had to do with freedom of speech concerns, and this is an example of that. I mean, there are unintended consequences to some of the language. So yes, I agree. It's not just a Spanish language media request, it's any language.
And
So,
Renalda, I just want to interject.
yes,
Also with Native American issues, people come to me, and they'll ask my opinion or how I felt about something.
correct.
The media?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so just to clarify, I do believe that the president speaks for the board. I think that there should be a process where, but kind of like we had before, because I know that communications would reach out to me and it would be approved for me through the district communications to be speaking on behalf of the board. And it was all like approved. You know, everything I would say would be approved by the board and what we all believe in. So it's not like just us being okay to individually speak to the media as board members. It would still be through the president, but just defining that process a little bit. Hopefully I explained myself what's going on in my head.
So what was the process, Janelle, exactly?
So what I would do was if I get a request to be on media, I would send that to our communications person, who was Monica at the time. And then she would give me some pointers of what the district language was so that I can make it my own, but still stick to like a general theme. And then the board would know beforehand that I would be speaking to the media, and that would go out, and then I would be able to do the interview or whatever it might be.
And did this ever happen?
Yes. Yeah,
Oh,
that's
okay.
yeah.
And so how was the board notified?
I believe it was just like an email thread. Like just, yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
I do not recall.
Yeah, I remember the one that's off the top of my head was when we did the superintendent town halls.
So sorry, may I jump in?
Yeah.
Okay. So I think what's kind of being fleshed out of this is that in the past, it's, it went to communications. And so Dr. Blakey, I'm wondering, I think absolutely any board inquiries need to go through the board president, which is what you said, board member Astorga, like it needs to go through the board president, and then working with Dr. Blakey or Dr. Blakey's designee. They need to make the decision as to, who to reach out to. They're certainly not calling me to do Spanish language media. But I think, that media inquiry absolutely needs to be directed through the board president first and then dispersed.
Dispatched out too. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Which I think is exactly what you're saying, board member Astorga. But it seems like maybe prior to Dr. Blakey being here, things went to communications and didn't necessarily go through the board president. So we need to make sure that is fixed.
Well,
Oh,
I would like
it-
clarification. Did it go through the board president? Because it seems like it would have had to regardless of administration.
Yes,
in the
this-
past, you mean?
Yes.
In the
since,
previous board?
No, no. I mean, no, because Janelle is the example here. So she wasn't on the previous board, but no, I mean, starting in January of 2024, when we all began this term, it went through board president Danielle and then, or communications, Danielle, board president, and then dispatched to Janelle in this specific instance.
So I'm not sure how it went from communications to board president, because I probably wasn't involved at that moment, but I did want to clarify that when I said that it went out to the board, it was only the board president. I just double checked for you. So I believe she was included in that way, but I'm not sure if she was included beforehand.
And Madam Chair, we typically don't approve whether or not a board can or can't speak to the media. We can refer them to this policy, but it typically, if media asks to talk to the board, we typically do refer to the board president, and then the board president can kind of farm out if there's somebody that the board president wants to talk to about that specific issue. But typically, if media goes to us to speak to the board or to get a board statement on something, we discuss it with the board president. But we never approve or don't approve. We kind of relay the message, connect the two entities.
Thank you for that clarification.
So, but if I can bring it back, I think it doesn't seem to be that there's consensus that this section doesn't necessarily need to be here for 4R. That it can be elsewhere in governance manual, the amendments that we have coming up.
So would that be back to your original suggestion for P? Under,
Yeah, like some of it would go, I mean, like right now, it doesn't even need to be an amendment because the whole thing is X'd out right now. So, I mean, I would say we leave the whole thing X'd out from 4R currently. And then when we discuss the governance manual on Wednesday, if 1 through 6 needs to go into 4P, and then number 7 is included under president's officer obligations, then we can do that. But I think for right now, with our discussion of 4R, are we in agreement that where it's X'd out right now, we are in agreement with that?
so
Just so
I
we
just looked at
don't-
my notes and it says, keep number 7 and discuss. So, and I think that's what we just did, right? Media inquiries should be directed to the board president. And when speaking as an individual, board members should clarify that they are not speaking for the entire board. As individual members have no authority to commit the district to any policy, act, or expenditure per governance manual, etc. So where would we put that language?
I don't want to, say, I'm not sure right now. I think that that's a discussion that I'd have to look at before Wednesday. But I think that number 7 in particular has merit. I think it needs to stay in the governance manual somewhere, potentially under president, roles or, I mean, it has a place. I just don't know if we're looking at the intent of this policy is board member discussion, board member requests for information. How do we gather information? I just don't know that this number 7 needs to stay in 4R.
And so on that point, I just want to quickly check in with everybody. I think we're all in agreement with that. Is that correct? I don't want to speak for anyone.
Yes, I'm in agreement with that.
Board Member Benavides?
Just looking at number 7, I don't know why we would need to take it out, because to me, it's very clear that it really goes to the president and the president decides. So,
Well, yes and no, right? But yeah, I mean, it also clarifies that when speaking as an individual, board members should make that clear, that they're not
Okay,
speaking for the
so-
entire board. And
So,
I
okay.
like that language too.
mhm.
I mean, we're doing this for future, this is kind of a legacy thing, for future board members. And so if you're a new board member, where are you? Put your new board member hat on and you're looking at this manual and you get a request from media. Would you go to the request for information portion or? And board member
I think
Benavides.
this has a potential issue for board members who are up for election, because they're going to be contacted by the media. Often they fill out questionnaires, they ask specific questions. And so, because they are board members, not just candidates, and they are beholden to the governance manual, then are they supposed to not speak honestly about a question they're asked that maybe goes against something we voted on? I mean, that could be an issue.
The
So-
language here makes it clear that they have a right to do that as individual board
Right.
members.
Okay, so I guess what I'm saying is, in that case then, do the board members who are up for election want to remove this and remove that right? I mean, I think you have it anyway. It's really, it's a governance manual, it's predicated on somebody. If you do something against it, then somebody has to call you on it, right? So, there's that, but.
I absolutely want to keep it in the governance manual. I think that whole section needs to be included, but I think maybe that whole section just needs to be moved to the community engagement with the Board of Education section. So section 4P, which is, because to me, like, engagement with the media is kind of de facto engagement with the community. So I
Okay.
absolutely think that language needs to stay. I just don't know if it needs to stay in 4R.
Okay,
If
I'm
that-
so sorry. I thought we were talking about
And
taking everything out.
And I
Does
guess
that clarify?
I'm questioning that only because board member Benavides made a good point, and that, well, I have mixed feelings about this, board member Jackson. Again, if I'm a new member, and this scenario that board member Benavides just, 4 of us are going to face that this year, media requests. So does that fall under requests for information? Because community engagement, I align more with the vision and the values and outreach, which can involve the media. So I guess I'm suggesting that it doesn't have to be only in one spot where we get this in, where we have this clarified. Yes, it is redundant.
Right. I mean, I'll just stick with my statement that I think that whole section can be moved to 4P. So,
Okay.
that's
Anyone else?
where I stand.
Okay. Anyone else? And I don't mean to ignore you, board member Tomorito. Unless she's lost the signal.
No, it looks like she's still there.
Okay.
Yeah. I think it works fine in 4P. I also think it works fine where it is, but if Board Member Jackson feels strongly about moving it.
Only because if we're sticking with the intent of what 4R was meant to be, which was internal discussions amongst us in the district, then to me, in that sense, outside inquiries are community inquiries. They're not internal inquiries that we're having amongst ourselves as board members or us to the district.
Okay, so I'm going to ask this again, and I'm sorry, I feel like we're spinning at this point. Then that means we need to take out that entire section, request from constituents, community members, elected officials, and the media, not just number 7, the entire thing. Okay,
Correct.
I'm sorry. I don't know what I'm missing here, but everybody keeps focusing on number 7. Okay, so
Yes.
take that out and move number 7 to 4P. We're good.
Well, I
Yeah.
think we're moving all of it, right? It's not just
Okay,
number 7, we're moving all of it. Is that correct?
You're moving the entire
Okay.
section.
The entire
entire-
section.
Okay,
Everything that under requests from constituents, everything that is X'd out right now, my suggestion is that the whole thing gets moved to 4P.
okay. So I'm so sorry. I have to ask this. Why were we focusing on number 7 then?
Because at the last meeting, there was a discussion that everything except number 7 be removed from
Okay.
4R.
Okay, I'm up to
Yeah.
speed. I apologize.
Yeah.
No,
It's
no,
I don't know where
sorry.
I've been.
Sorry.
I'm so
yeah.
sorry.
So,
And the good news is we don't actually have to currently amend that section because it's already X'd out anyway. So it was already not going to be there anyway.
okay, so I'm going to throw one more thing in. And so we've settled that this last section is going to 4P community engagement. I hear a majority in favor of that. Okay. I want to take our eyesights back to the previous page, request for information. The section that begins, Albuquerque Public Schools Board of Education members will follow this process when we're requesting information from the administration. Number 7 below. Is it another number 7? Let me. So number 5 has been crossed out. It's now number 7 for information not readily is accessible, correct? I don't want to say it out loud. I think accessible is the correct word. The district must provide the requested materials within 20 business days. This is no, that's not it. Well, yes, it is. The district must provide the requested materials within 20 business days. If this is unreasonably difficult due to factors like volume or location, the district may extend the timeline to 30 business days, but must notify the board member of the reason for the delay. I'm sorry, bear with me, keep going. Number 8, it's the portion, it's the one that deals with the agenda. Language about the agenda.
Yeah,
And
that's
it was,
for 8.
was it number 8?
Yeah, if a request is denied and the board member wishes to pursue it, they may email the board president and superintendent to request it is placed on a future board agenda for consideration.
Yes, that's it. So my suggestion is that requests for agenda items, the language I'd like to see is requests for agenda items will be announced and scheduled during the president's report on the dais. Just because on a future board agenda is just too nebulous. I think we need to hold ourselves to a timeline. It needs to be time bound. And again, there's a transparency concern, and I think I brought this up at the last meeting. We need to get more transparency about agenda items that are requested. And so this language has implications for, I forget what section board agendas are discussed in. Maybe it's K. But what I'm suggesting or offering is requests for agenda items will be announced and scheduled during the president's report on the dais.
So can I clarify, are you asking, so this is in regards to
Number 8.
this is in regards to requests for information. So
Yes,
if the
correct.
board member has gone through all of the requests and still wants it to be on the board
What?
agenda,
Yes.
but it sounds like what you're requesting is all requests need to be placed in the president's report.
Well, I'm suggesting that this will have implications for, yes. So, but let's stay focused on this one. For
Well,
the
I am
request.
focused. What I'm thinking, like the way you stated it, it seems like that's more something that would need to go into
4K.
thank you, 4K, not necessarily here.
Well, I think it needs to be clarified here because to request
If I may, I think what your request is, Chair Dominguez, is just to add like a time measurement of when that request will be on the agenda. So you're still saying that if your RFI was denied and you wanted to bring it to the board for an agenda item, what would be that timeline? So just adding on number 8, instead of it will be placed on a future board agenda for consideration, it will be placed on the next board agenda, something like that.
So my concern is twofold, right? That's half of it. That's exactly right. So instead of a future board agenda, it's on the next board agenda for consideration. But what's left hanging is how does the rest of the board know? And that's where the transparency issue. So if a request is denied, the board member wishes to pursue it, they may email the board president and superintendent to request it be on the next agenda for consideration and will be reported during the president's report and will be announced. And
Right. So the concern is if the majority of the board supports the request. So your question is, how are we going to know if the majority of the board is interested in that request? Yeah, what is that process?
So I'm suggesting at the end, it will be placed on the next board agenda for consideration
And included in,
The
and
president.
included in the board president's report.
but then that's going to prolong the issue depending on when the next board meeting is. Are you comfortable with that?
Well, it's more specific than future board agenda.
Well, no, that's more specific, but
If it's on the next board agenda for consideration, that creates it as its own agenda item, which means that it doesn't actually need to be included in the president's report. Because if it's a request that it's placed on the next board agenda for consideration, that
Okay,
makes it a
so,
consideration item. It doesn't need to be included in the president's report. Because then do you see what I'm saying?
yes,
If I may, I think
yes.
that it would be in the president's report before it gets on the agenda, because I think, so correct me if I'm wrong, Board Member Dominguez, it's only going to be on the president's report to notify the rest of the board members that there was a request for information so that they might show their interest, so that it can be placed on the next agenda.
I think any request like that, like a request for information needs to come to the attention of the entire board. And then as a board, we decide if it's a worthy topic, right? Or a worthy request.
So not only if it's denied, but any request is what you're saying.
Correct.
So that's actually a 4K
yeah.
issue. That's not a request for information issue.
Well, okay, but it impacts this. So how do we rewrite number 8 so that there's transparency and a time-bound criterion met? Do you see what I'm getting at?
I think there's confusion because the transparency comes from the fact that it is placed on the agenda as a discussion item. So
Well, a discussion item, it just says for consideration.
well,
Okay,
you have to discuss it to consider it. So
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Board Member Jackson, but
That's
Chair
okay.
Dominguez, what you're saying is you're afraid that a request might be denied and the board member wants to pursue it. And so they emailed the president and asked that it be placed on the next board agenda. And it's not. And where's the accountability? How is the rest of the board going to know that this request was made and that it needed to be placed on the next agenda? Like, where's that accountability? There's got to be a way to say that without.
correct.
So I believe it's already stated that all requests have to be shared with the full board. I mean, that's already in our governance manual. So any request for information as it stands right now that comes into Dr. Blakey already has to be shared with us. So some things are shared in at a glance. Some things are shared via email. So I think.
Oh, right, but here's the difficulty with that. Our accountability to the public is also missing in that. Yeah, so, but
I guess-
let's go back to number 8 so we can wrap up the RFI.
So I mean, I think really where your larger discussion, your larger concern that you have is the discussion that needs to be saved for 4K. Like how board agendas are set. I think you need to, my suggestion would be you kind of hold that for when we get to 4K on the governance manual. Because I think that's where your main concern is. This procedure is very specific to if you request that you want all fences painted red, and that request, or you want to know why all the fences are painted red, and that request gets denied. Like if Dr. Blakey's like, I'm not going to tell you why they're all painted red.
Well, let's
And it's
simplify
hold
it.
on, hold on. And it's really important to you that you know that. Then what would happen is you would email the board president and the superintendent and say, I really want this placed on the agenda. It would come on the agenda to the full board. Then the full board, all 7 of us, would have a discussion to decide, is this really important that we know this information or not? That's where if the full board decides, yes, it's super important that we know why all the fences are painted red, that creates the cause of action for Dr. Blakey. So I think as far as number 8 is concerned, if you want to change it to placed on the next board agenda for consideration, I think that addresses your concern. And then the larger agenda concern needs to be held in check for 4K.
Correct. Correct. So again, just to simplify this, I'm proposing that we strike through a future board agenda or future and make that, well, get rid of the indefinite article to a future and make it the next board agenda. The simple fix, yeah? So we can move out of RFI?
Sorry, not yet. I had two requests. The first one I sent in the questions and answers. It was under, so suggest changing number 1 under request for information to the following. If a formal request for information is deemed necessary after an honest analysis of the process listed above, board members should submit it through the district Let's Talk platform. So it changes the wording slightly, but what I'm hoping to do with that language is to, again, place the onus upon the board members to make sure that they have used all available methods to find the information first before going to Dr. Blakey and her staff for requests for information, because we really need to be mindful of the fact that every single time we go to Dr. Blakey, and I might be speaking for you, Dr. Blakey, but she feels an obligation to drop what she's doing to answer our questions. And every time we do that, that is distracting her from the work of the district to answer our questions. So I think I'm asking that there be maybe a little bit more forceful language in that first one, just to say, like, we really have to make sure that we have done our work first before taking the focus away from the district onto our questions. Is there any discussion?
Well, I'm curious, Dr. Blakey, I mean, I think my sense of it, and again, it's just my sense of it from talking to the board members with whom I communicate, I don't get the sense that do you feel overburdened by
I think that
requests?
anytime a request comes in, and actually we just had a conversation about this in our cabinet meeting today. The administration does feel a sense of urgency to drop everything to respond to the board members. So it does, I mean, if there are 7 board members and they each ask one question a week, then it does, take time. But I do think that there is a onus on the administration that we prioritize questions from board members first. So if board members were able to find that information on their own, like certainly that would have us not have to find it. But we do we do drop everything to prioritize board members' requests
Sure.
above other
Are
requests.
but would you say you're getting something weekly from us?
Oh, for sure, yes.
And something that weekly from us that we could easily find ourselves?
Sometimes yes, like if there are policies or data that is of like on SAPR or policies are already in existence, there's things that I would think that we always find, I mean, we find it. But if board members found it on their own, because there's
So I'm
7,
glad-
I mean, there are 7 board members, so it's it adds up.
So I'm glad you brought up SAPR, because when I do ask for information, it's because SAPR is not the easiest thing to filter through. For example, I requested the feeder schools, like what? Our website is pretty unwieldy and not very user friendly, but so I just needed to know what feeder schools go with what schools. And I was able to get that, I think, from Kizito Wajenji, and I really appreciated that. I think that got sent out to others, but it would be helpful to have that easily accessible on the website, or even on our board member page where it says, what schools we are responsible for. And I'm trying to think of, I mean, it's usually SAPR and filtering information out of SAPR. And I know I've sat down with Chris West and have said, this is what I wanted. I've spent lots of hours trying to figure it out. And when he tried to do the same thing, the request, it's like, oh, well, you can't do that. Let's figure this out. I can get this for you. So I know that I try very hard personally to honor your time. I know you've got a lot going on. So I'm just curious about, where those requests are coming from, and how often, if they're weekly but my sense of it is that
May I jump in? I think we're actually going to get the answer to that question, because we do have involved in the RFI an agreement that that information will be shared quarterly. I believe it's
yes, I think I saw that.
Oh, sorry, I'm gonna have to text my mom here in a second to go pick up Claire. We have that. So I think you are going to get the answer to that question of how the board is actually using the time.
It's number 3.
Yeah. So, but can we just how does the board feel about the insertion of that language into number 1 about there being an honest analysis prior to embarking on the formal request for information
I think
process?
we need to define what honest analysis is and who's doing that. And so I'm taking it as I'm doing an honest analysis and looking for everything I can find on my own, and then
Mhm.
elevating it to administration if I cannot do that.
Mm-hmm. And that's how I meant it. So
And
if
how
there's
many, I
better-
mean, how
if
much
there's
time
better
should we?
verbiage if there's better verbiage to make that known, then I'm happy for suggestions. But that was definitely intent. The intent was I need to make sure that I'm doing what I can first before I take it to the superintendent.
So maybe something like a good faith effort on the part of the board member to find as much information as they can on their own, not verbatim, that's a lot, but
Maybe after a good faith effort. Let's see.
What is that? You know, is that 15 minutes? Is that 30 minutes? Is that an hour?
Well, I think it's
I looked on the website, I looked through the policies, I looked in my governance manual, I looked these places. I didn't find the answer to my question. I could be missing it. You know, future or guidance in this case would be helpful. That's when I can't find something and I have to ask somebody a question, that's usually what I do. So they know I've made an effort first before going to them.
So suggested language, if a formal request for information is deemed necessary after a good faith effort on the part of the board member. No, I don't like that. If a formal request for information is deemed necessary after a good faith effort of the process listed above, board members may submit it through the district or should submit it through the district's Let's Talk platform. So just take out honest analysis and insert good faith effort.
And what's the process listed above?
That's the
What number
That's
is
the-
that?
that's the whole policy, like under the accordingly, the 1 through 9. That's the
That's right.
process.
It's on the other page.
So you
So
have
maybe
to.
it should be inserted under request for information. Albuquerque Public Schools Board of Education members will follow this process when requesting information from the administration. Will follow this process after having made a good faith effort to find the information on their own.
Under the like the introductory phrase, is that what you're saying?
Yeah. So you're suggesting you list the actual process that you follow. Is that what you're suggesting?
We're
board member?
talking about two different things at this point,
Oh.
but where to put that, because
I'm just trying to figure out what process above. It says of the process listed above. Could you direct me to that? Where are we in this document?
Okay, so on page 2, under requests for information, that request for information, those are the step-by-step, those are the steps that the board members have to go through to get their information, right? What I'm
Okay.
saying is the board members shouldn't embark on those steps, those requests for information, until on page 1, they have made a good faith effort to assess whether or not they understand that they're asking questions that are focused on their governance responsibilities, that they have evaluated the necessity and urgency of the request for information, whether or not they've made a good faith effort to, if it's readily accessible on their own, whether they've done that analysis first before embarking on the steps under the request for information headline.
So maybe I'm looking at the wrong document here. I don't think so.
Well, I've got to pause for a sec. I need to tell my mom to go pick up Claire. So let me step out.
So I'm asking other board members, where is the suggested change happening? Suggest changing number 1, if information request is necessary. Is that what we're looking at?
Yes. So
Board
that's
mem-
what Board Member Jackson is requesting be modified, and modified based on the board member having run their request for information through number 1 through 9 on the previous page to make sure it meets all of those requirements. But that's what I'm understanding her to say. But I don't know that that necessarily makes sense, because number 4 says if the information is not readily available, board members may request it from the superintendent readily, so it's not like it says before you request information from administration, does it meet, is it something administration does? Is it something they are, authorized to speak about? It's not that cut and dry. So I don't know that if I were doing this myself, I would look at that initial list and say, oh, I can check off all of these, and then now I can go and ask administration, because it's not written that way, unless I'm totally misunderstanding what you're saying, Board Member Jackson.
No, I think, so I think what you're saying is that maybe my intent of adding that analysis is maybe already in there. Because by the time you get to number 4, you've already done steps 1, 2, and 3 and done that analysis.
Down to number 4. Number 4 gets to specifics, right? Readily available is defined as information that exists within current reports. Okay, but
The only
there are
thing I
lots of
want to,
reports.
the intent that I want to make sure is captured within this document somewhere is that board members are putting in a good faith effort to find information before we divert to Dr. Blakey and her staff. That's, if it's already in there, then I'll remove my request. I don't know that it's in there as strongly as I think it needs to be.
I think it's in number 3. It says board members will evaluate the necessity, urgency, and alignment with board responsibilities before requesting information. They are encouraged to first utilize existing reports, dashboards, or communication channels to locate the information independently.
Okay.
Or mine
Yeah,
left field again.
No, I
could
think
left
I
field
think it's
again.
there. Is the good faith effort there?
We can add that.
To evaluate the necessity, urgency, and alignment with board responsibilities before requesting information. I think
Can we
that's
just
pretty
change it?
clear.
Can we change it to say board members will make a
Make a
good
good
faith effort?
Effort to evaluate the necessity, urgency, and alignment with board responsibilities.
Mhm.
Okay. That seems easier than inserting another item. So it would read for number 3, board members will make a good faith effort to evaluate the necessity, urgency, and alignment with board responsibilities before requesting information. They are encouraged to first utilize existing reports, dashboards, communication channels to locate the information independently.
List not exhaustive.
That's what?
Nothing. That was just.
Did you say
Okay, and
that?
that work, thank you, that encapsulates what I was hoping for. I do have, I'm sorry, I have one more. This is the one that woke me up in the middle of the night. If you guys will indulge me, unless somebody else has something.
Go ahead.
It goes along this same theme. So under so after number 5 on page 1. Okay, so after number 5 on page 1 would make number 6. Requests for information are intended solely to address board member inquiries and do not direct or imply action by the superintendent. Any action by the superintendent must be authorized by full board directive. Because again, we have the right to request information, absolutely, but that request for information should not be interpreted as a request for action by the superintendent. So if using the red fence, if I request to know why all of the fences are painted red and not blue, it shouldn't be an implication to Dr. Blakey that she now has to go and paint all the fences blue.
Would it be, I would find it more helpful if I could get a solid example that of something that has been requested that was an indirect
Directive.
Directive, yeah, which was essentially a directive. If you're comfortable doing that, Superintendent Blakey.
I don't think I have one like off the top of my head, but it could be, you know, a board member suggesting that I'm just making these up. A meeting at a school is held, you know, a constituent tells them that they don't like that their instructional council meeting is at 8 o'clock in the morning because they can't go because it's not open to working families. So the board member approaches me and says, this school needs to change the time of the meeting because this parent isn't able to go. So that's like a directive that now all meetings have to be after 5 o'clock, for example. Like it could turn into a request becoming a directive instead of a request for information. So the painting of something isn't that far fetched necessarily, because it could be, you know, I have, as a board member, have had concerns that all of the entrances to the schools are in this they're painted blue, and people find it very confusing. It should be painted a different color. So I think that it's in anything that a board member could take from one constituent that says something to them and ask it in a question where they're directing myself or staff to change something for everyone based on a constituent question.
Okay, but that's different than when I get concerns from constituents about what I consider administrative stuff. I would call that administrative stuff. I'm going to forward it. Thank you for bringing this to my attention. This is an administrative issue. I am forwarding this to, is that different or is that?
Yes, that's
Okay.
different because it would be, if you're saying I had a constituent that brought this to my attention and I'd like to know the answer to it, and I want the answer to be, and you want the answer to be a specific thing to be able to go and tell. If you're just passing information on without the intent of having a response back,
Not a
then
directive.
yeah, it's not
Or-
direct. If it's saying here's information from a constituent, please respond to me and let me know that you took care of the issue and it's no longer a problem. And it could be somebody wanting to change a bus stop that's too far from their house. So it is a directive because it's saying I'm asking you to respond to this constituent, but also telling you let me know when you change the bus stop. So you're giving the directive.
Yes,
saying,
right.
my constituent is mad that the bus stop isn't in front of their house and it's 3 houses down. As it's an administrative concern, please let me know when the bus stop is changed.
Right, right. But if we ask, how, let us know how the problem gets resolved, or is that? Do you all read that as a directive?
I think that we're talking about different things.
I think
Requesting-
so, but I'm just trying to get clarity.
Yeah, a request for information in my mind is what is the bus stop route for all of the elementary, or what are the bus stop routes for all the elementary schools in my district? That's a request for information. I'm not sure how that would turn into a directive unless I was very explicit about it and, you know, you are well within your rights to say, here's all the information. I'm not changing the bus stops out there, you know, like I don't know how naturally it would turn into a directive. I think it's very different when you are elevating a concern, which can turn into a directive, you know. The bus doesn't stop close enough to my house. You know, I want to report that. Okay, then I understand it doesn't stop close enough to your house. Does not mean, which somebody could take as, we're going to make sure it does, you know. That's very different than just requesting information about something. So I know that this is probably, there's been a specific incident that's you know, precipitated the need for this, but I don't know that just a plain request for information can turn into a directive just organically like that. It just seems odd to me. But if it's something that you would like us to consider, I'm all for it.
No, I think that's a good example because if it's a request of information that the board member just wants for information, then that's like a good example of a request for information. If it's request for information that a board member is trying to get in order to give it to their constituent who has a further question, then that's, I think, where the request for information gets kind of muddy because you're trying to be the intermediary person who's requesting the information as a board member to then give to somebody else. So, I think that is a good purpose for the board member to think first. Am I requesting information because I need it to make an informed decision in a policy, or if it's connected to like the progress monitoring report, something like that, versus I'm requesting information because I've heard a constituent complain about something and I'm like going in to try to find more information about it rather than just directing the constituent to us to get the right information.
So I mean, I think that's kind of, again, like I woke up in the middle of the night with this one was just like that blanket statement that, you know, that the request, again, the onus is on us, that the requests for information, we're doing it because we generally like just need, you know, want to have this information. but that we're not then turning it into a blanket directive or an implication that the superintendent must act. So
I think that's already in section. It's a, the superintendent is our only employee, and we do not give directives to employees and staff members, right?
Well, and if we provide information that we've requested because a constituent has asked us, which is usually going to be the case because, there are instances where I'm just doing research, but usually it's because somebody has asked me specifically about something. I'm not just sitting around wondering what are the all the bus stops for all the elementary schools in my district, so if we provide that information because a constituent asked us, and then it's their natural inclination to then make a directive or make a request, as long as it doesn't come from us, then I think we're okay, because they would probably make the request anyway. We just provided them with factual information to, I mean, I'm not sure where it stops. We can't stop constituents from making requests or asking for things. I mean, we can not make directives ourselves, but if we provide information which then leads to them doing it, I don't see an issue with that. I mean, we shouldn't encourage it, of course. We're not going to say, here's all the information you need, now go do this and ask for this, and but we are beholden to our constituents and providing them information and being their voice when they don't have the opportunity to do it on their own. So
I'd like to hear from other board members. Where do we stand on this? And for some reason, I don't have the language that you are proposing, board member Jackson.
you do not, because it came to my head at 2:00 this morning.
Okay, I see, okay. So, I'd like to hear from board member Astorga and board member Tomorito.
I need to hear the language again because that was a lot of discussion.
So it was requests for information are intended solely to address board member inquiries and do not direct or imply action by the superintendent.
Yeah, I'm fine with that language, and it kind of follows the theme that others suggested in other parts of the governance manual of understanding that the board does board stuff and not administrative stuff. So it's similar language, and that's fine with me.
And so are you saying that where do we stick this language? And if you wouldn't mind repeating.
Sure.
RFIs are intended solely for.
So first, my suggestion is to include it on page 1 after number 5. So it would be the new number 6. And it would be RFIs are intended solely to address board member inquiries and do not direct or imply action by the superintendent.
And do not imply or.
Do not direct or imply action by the superintendent.
Okay, board member Tomorito, are you on?
I'm on.
Okay, what's your sense of all this?
I agree. I agree with what's stated. And I know when we were talking with RFI, some of the concerns too, when it came to actual like complaints and where do we send those? Because when we read, I think at that time we were reading something from someone in special education. And how is that formatted? But I know when I do get hold of the superintendent, it's more of whether it's special education. I send those directly to her. I just send them. There's no response needed. But mine is primarily special education and also processes and questioning, especially when it comes to the law. That's, other than that, that's the way the majority of my communications fall.
Okay. So is anyone opposed to putting this language in after number 5, creating a new number 6, and then adjusting all the numeration after that? Okay. You can sleep soundly now, Board Member Jackson.
This is how I have fun these days.
Okay, so we've got that language coming on page 1 after number 5. It's the new number 6. And we have in number 3 on the same page, board members will make a good faith effort to, and then continue with the rest of that, evaluate the necessity, urgency, alignment, blah, blah, blah. So we've got that edit. We've got the new number 6 edit, and actually, we took care of the number 5 edit. Readily available is readily accessible. And number 8 edit on page 2. We've scratched out a future, and we have the next board agenda. And the very last section moves to 4P. And with a discussion coming up regarding media. Correct?
Yeah.
And so, okay, Secretary Astorga, how do we create this? What does this motion look like? Did I get everything?
I think you got
Sure.
everything, and most of that is in the action memo too. So we can reference the action memo and then add the couple other ones that we did with the.
Well, I think, yes, I think we have, to my count, 2 edits on page 1, 1 edit on page 2, and the big edit on page 3.
The good news about page 3 is that it was actually already struck when it was presented to us, so it's not actually an amendment.
Okay.
So
So we're down to 1, 2, 3 edits. Correct? Okay. And so I need a motion to bring this discussion to a close. So actually, I need an amended motion.
but I can't remember, did I make the original motion or did member Benavides make the original motion?
Board
Did I do
member
it?
Benavides made the original motion, seconded.
Oh, so you got to amend.
All right.
Sorry for that.
That's
So
okay.
just to help you out, so edits to page 1, number 3.
Okay, hold on. Okay,
And page 1, number, new number 6.
mhm,
2, an edit to number 8. As discussed and agreed upon.
so I have edit to page 1, number 3, edit to page 1, creating a new number 6, edit to page 2, editing number 8, as we discussed and agreed upon. These are the changes.
Correct.
Okay. All right, so I want to amend my motion to approve the addition of section 4R, request for information, policy and process to the APS Board of Education Governance Manual, including page 1, edit to number 3, page 1, adding a new number 6, page 2, editing number 8, all changes that were discussed and agreed upon by the board. This is Board Member Benavides.
I will second. This is Board Member Jackson.
Okay, Dr. Albright, a roll call vote, please.
Nell Astorga,
Yes.
Ronaldo Tomorito,
Yes.
Heather Benavides,
Yes.
Courtney Jackson,
Yes.
Josefina Dominguez.
Yes. Finally, our next item is to discuss the APS Board of Education Governance Manual. And it says I'm the presenter, but I think I need to first have the ad hoc committee present its process and the process for the manual that is before us.
I can do that, Chair Dominguez. So we'll start with the process and then we can go into some of the suggestions. So, the whole governance manual review goes back to last year. And also bear with me because I'm having a hard time breathing these days. But just to go back from the beginning, I know there was a request from the policy committee to do a governance manual review around August of last year that was taken to the executive committee, and that is reflected in the September notes for the executive committee. We had a policy meeting in September, and it was told to us by executive committee that there would be a full board governance manual review scheduled for November. So with that, policy committee still met. We did some revisions to the governance manual. We then had a November meeting where the full board met and we created a survey. The survey was then submitted and completed December 6th by most board members. The ad hoc committee met to go over the survey results before the retreat on the 20th. And during that meeting, there were suggestions from board members Astorga, Gonzalez, and Benavides that were implemented in the draft that we created as ad hoc. Board member Dominguez had some questions, and most of the survey results said in process because there was the policy committee that was meeting for the governance manual. Board member Tomorito and also Benavides had some concerns and suggestions that were also put in that survey that we wanted to discuss at the retreat. What happened at the retreat on December 20th was not fully what we expected as an ad hoc committee because we wanted more discussion on some of those items that were more suggestions, concerns and not suggestions. So that was something that we wanted to get back to, and we can go through that as we go through the governance manual. actually going back before the retreat on the 20th, we had a December 18th meeting where there was a unanimous vote to pull policy or part of the governance manual's IJK off of consent agenda so that the full board can review those with the governance manual. So then we looked at that on the retreat on the 20th, and we gave our suggestions from the survey and what that looked like, where we had our sticky notes. And again, we wish that we had more discussion around that process because that was our intention as the ad hoc committee, but that did not happen. So during the break, there was a chance for all board members to send in some more suggestions, questions that they had on the governance manual, and that was due in January. So after that, the ad hoc met again, and we spent over 4 hours reviewing each governance manual that was submitted to us by the board members with their edits. And what we did was created a table of suggestions around those results. So that's what we'll be looking at today is the table of some of those suggestions and what that looks like. And I know that board member Dominguez and I met to go over that beforehand, and she also made sure that in this new document of the governance manual that you all received for this meeting has that policy language that we talked about before the governance manual review. So, and she can talk about that as well in that process, but that's the document that you will have now. But I know that's kind of like all over the place because there was a long process coming. So is there any questions on like what that looked like before I go into the table?
So,
Yeah, go ahead.
well, I just have a question. Thank you, Board Member Astorga, for going back over that timeline. I appreciate it. I guess my question on this particular agenda item is for you, Chair Dominguez. Because we are doing a full discussion of the board governance manual on Wednesday at the board meeting with the full board. I know there's 5 of us here, but it's not the full board. I guess I'm wondering why we're going to go through a discussion of the governance manual tonight when we're going to do that again on Wednesday, combined with the fact that we can't actually make any changes tonight because the agenda has already been posted for the Wednesday full board meeting. So I wonder, for like efficiency's sake, if it makes more sense for us to postpone this discussion until Wednesday when the full board meets. And so I'm happy to actually make that motion to move to postpone this discussion.
So I'd like, okay, how do other people feel about that?
I'm curious about the rules surrounding the first read, the second read, the timing of that, where this is concerned, and also community input. I just want to make sure we're not inadvertently, breaching those, but I don't know what they are, so I'm just throwing it out there.
So Board Member Jackson can help me with this, but I believe the first read was when we brought those survey results to the retreat on December 20th. And then we were supposed to have a second read, right, with the first policy meeting of the year.
Okay, so the survey results actually were provided at that meeting on the 20th. They were provided after. So
I didn't hear it.
Sorry, that's a little bit off. So actually, it was November where we got the first set, right? We had the first. There was an opportunity to provide comment. So the first opportunity to provide comment was from November to December. So we got the first set of comments that were the survey results. so that what came
Oh,
to
you're
the,
right, you're right. Okay.
yeah, so what
Wait,
came in
wait,
December.
what was due December 6th?
The survey.
The survey.
Right.
Right.
So that was the,
That was the
the-
survey that Ashley created. And yeah, and then we got those results. And then from
Mhm.
that,
when did
there
we
was-
get those results though? The survey
Well-
happened on the 6th and then it was published.
Ad hoc got the survey results, and that's when we created our document that we shared with you all for the December 20th retreat.
So, right, so it came, November was the first. There was an opportunity to comment via the survey from November to
Oh.
December. Then,
So-
so December 6th was.
Let me ask a question about November. I'm just trying to get the timeline here correct. So in November, at November's
sorry.
meeting,
Sorry, real quick, I actually did make a motion. So
Yes.
we actually need a second, just,
we need to,
just to move to discussion, but I did place a motion on the floor. So if we can just have a second to that motion to postpone, then we can have this discussion.
I will second Board Members Jackson's motion to postpone.
so for clarification's sake, we are motioning to table a discussion.
I am motioning to postpone this discussion item 5.1 to Wednesday, February 5th, because it is already listed as a discussion action item on the February 5th Board of Education meeting.
Does
agenda.
that, and does that, I just want clarity about this from parliamentarians, and other board members understanding. Does that preclude us from discussing what we dove into?
We can are you asking me?
I'm asking everybody what their understanding is.
So my understanding
par-
is that we are having a discussion on the motion to postpone. So, in concert with that, the reason for having a motion to postpone is because even if we were to continue on with a discussion of the governance manual, we would not be able to make any changes or amendments to the governance manual because the governance manual has already been placed on the full board agenda for Wednesday. So to stick with OMA, to give the community their opportunity to comment on the governance manual as listed on the agenda, we can't make changes now because we wouldn't have the 72 hours that we would need to have it posted. So the overall point is that any discussion that we have on the governance manual right now would be futile and inefficient because we couldn't make any changes to the governance manual anyway, without violating OMA.
So what I heard in that piqued my interest was that on the 5th, there will be a 30-day public input.
No.
But
On
when I heard
Wednesday, we're
public input.
discussing. Well, because that's a public meeting, right? Like the Board of Education meeting is on Wednesday. That is where public forum occurs. That's where, if the public has any sort of input on any of the agenda items on goal 1, the governance manual, all the things that are already listed, that's their opportunity to come and make input at public forum. The governance manual should be finalized and moving forward after Wednesday.
Okay, so understanding all that, which means that we would table all discussion.
For right now.
Yeah, correct, at this moment. And so with that understanding and with the second, may I have a roll call vote then?
Janelle Astorga,
Oh, hold on, we need clarification from four.
Yes,
Uh,
sorry. So we have a motion, we have a second. And I understand if we do have a discussion, we can't change anything in,
But we're not, there's not gonna be a discussion.
but why?
If you vote in favor of the
Is that, I'm sorry,
motion,
did the motion say that we're making a motion to not discuss?
correct?
No,
Okay.
so I
No.
believe this is the discussion right now before we do roll call on what we want to do. So if there's concerns, we can talk about it now before roll call.
Mhm. Right.
Yeah.
And so I think
My-
that we've already gone through this and then I asked the question.
Well,
what
that's
was
breaking what we have been doing all night long, which is somebody made a motion, right?
Right.
To act on. And we
made
got a second.
Somebody seconded and then we had a discussion.
Exactly, yes.
Okay,
But let me clarify. My motion is to postpone discussion on the
Okay.
governance manual until the 5th. Not to postpone discussion on the governance manual. It's to postpone discussion of the
Delving
governance
into.
manual until Wednesday, until February 5th.
the amendments, the actual amendments, so and language of the manual. So
Because everything that's listed in the policy committee meeting, that exact document is already on the board agenda for Wednesday. So we will have this discussion on Wednesday with the full board present. I'm saying it doesn't make sense to have this discussion now and
understand.
then have it again on
I'm-
Wednesday.
yes, I'm just getting clear about what discussion we're going to have after the vote.
Well,
And I'm hearing from you, Board Member Jackson, that there will be no discussion.
Right, because that's what her motion is, to postpone all discussion,
Correct.
not discussion of
until
change.
Wednesday.
Right.
So we're going to proceed with, and I think that answered your question. Is that correct, Board Member Benavides?
Thank you.
Okay. So we are now ready to proceed with a roll call vote. Dr. Albright.
Janelle Astorga,
Yes.
Heather Benavides,
No.
Ronaldo Tomorito,
No.
Courtney Jackson,
Yes.
Josefina Dominguez.
No. And so we will have a discussion about the manual. And we were talking about, so I agree, let's make this surgical. So what topics do we want to address now? In order to keep it productive.
Well, I would like to just go through the table that the ad hoc created, because that shows most of the changes that would be brought up.
Okay, so there's a suggestion that we go through the table.
I need to
Board-
take a restroom break. I will be right back.
Okay. And that might be a good, can we all take a restroom break or a water break?
I think we should because one of our members is not here, so.
Yes. Okay. So we will be right back in 5 minutes. So I know we have board member Tomorito on. So we're waiting on board member Astorga.
I'm here, Board Member Dominguez.
Oh, you are here. Okay. Well, board member Tomorito, you are here, right?
Yes.
Okay. So I'll wait for Superintendent Blakey. And, okay. And Dr. Albright, are you with us?
I am.
Okay, great. Then I think we will proceed. So after that quick break, here's what I'd like to cover. Because we don't need to prolong this. We heard from Ad Hoc Chair Astorga. She reviewed the process, and so I'd like to hear from other board members and their response to board member Astorga's outline of the timeline. So, and then I agree. I think we should reserve our conversation or review and discussion about proposed amendments to Wednesday. So we'll make this short and sweet, I hope. And so I want to allow Board Member Benavides one more time to recap your questions about process.
Thank you, Chair Dominguez. I would like to ask that we don't go over 10 minutes, if at all possible. We've been here a very long time. There are a lot of people on this call. Thank you for being here, but I don't want this to go all night. I just want to go back to my original question. I want to make sure that we are not breaching the first read, second read, and ignoring community input on this process. If I can be sure that we've done that, then, you know, I'm good.
Okay. Board Member Tomorito.
Yes, my questions, I have two of them. The first one is, and as I'm looking here at the summary of ad hoc governance manual suggestions, this is the first time I've ever seen it this clear and written. Other times it's been cut and paste, it's been posted notes, it's been never to the point where the clear understanding of first, second, and third read were ever really clarified. And this document right now is pretty easy to read, but I haven't seen this at all in any other documents that were put before us, or even to qualify it as first, second, and committee read. My second question is, I would like to know how the ad hoc committee usurps power over a standing committee and how this just automatically went to the board. I find that we're, one, not following our own proper governance practices that we have in place. And all of a sudden, this is totally a big surprise. So that's how I'm going to leave it. Thank you.
Okay. And I just want to point out a few things.
Can we respond before we get more questions, just so I don't lose them?
Okay.
Yeah, just quickly, because I know there's 3 questions already on the table, so I want to make sure that they're answered. So just to start with Board Member Benavides' question about community engagement, that was one of the first questions I asked when we started this process, is what community input needs to happen since it's the governance manual for the board members. So at any point when we were going through the governance manual public, it's online, it's on the APS website. So community members can look at that, and if they have any comments, questions, or concerns, they can always email us or come to public comment, just like any other agenda item. So that's how we would get that. So throughout this process, it's been public. The notes have been public. The survey results were also on Diligent, things like that. So that's how we would get input if there was community input. We didn't necessarily take it to community because this is for board members. It's not something that we are putting towards the district. And I don't know if Member Jackson, you have anything to add for that? Is there any follow-up?
You summed it up.
Is there any follow-up question for that, Board Member Benavides?
That's great. Thank you.
Of course. And then Board Member Tomorito. So this document that you see in front of you with the table is something that Board Member Jackson and I created just to clarify some of those results. I know that it's a lot to look at when you're looking at the entire governance manual with all of the updates and striking in different colors. So we definitely wanted to make it more clear, like you're saying. This was supposed to be presented to you all the first policy meeting of the year. We just didn't get to it because there wasn't enough time. So this would have already been presented to you all before the board meeting on Wednesday. So we would have had a month to look at it before. But since we ran out of time, and we didn't go over it, that's why you probably didn't see it, or yeah. So just wanted to clarify that for you. I don't know if you have any follow-up questions. You're on mute, Board Member Tomorito.
Sorry. It was just very confusing. But then all of a sudden now we have a document. So that's what I'm trying to understand.
Yeah, so this
if
was trial and error for us too, because the reason we gave you the full governance manual document is so that you can see explicitly where those changes occurred and you can have that document. And we realized it was even hard for us sometimes to keep track, so we changed the method.
And the other thing, when we're talking about community, especially when we went into the goals, and there were specific things that I know that were said about changing them, and I know people don't want to change them. But my concern there is a particular voice was not included in clarifying those goals. And that was another reason why, and I'm sure on Wednesday, I will state that point as a discussion. But I'm just rather shocked, and I'm only going to say that because in my second question, it was just about how did the ad hoc committee usurp its particular powers over a standing committee when we already have these governance policies in place, and why did it all of a sudden change?
Yeah, good question. So we actually did not supersede this committee at all. When we had our full board meeting, there was an ask for this ad hoc committee to be created, and there was asked for members to nominate themselves to be on it. So that's how that came about. So anything that we did, we already knew we would bring it to policy committee and we would have discussion here first. So in no way is the ad hoc committee like overriding any of the work that the policy committee has done. We were just an avenue to make sure that everybody's voice was heard while reviewing the governance manual.
But my other question is then why is it going to the board directly and not going to the policy committee?
It was going to, it's already been on the policy committee, but like it was already said, last meeting, it was on the agenda and we didn't get to it. So that's why we're doing it this meeting. And it's just it happens to be so close to the regular Board of Education meeting because it was on the implementation calendar to have it reviewed already this month.
Yeah, but why the rush also when we're finding out that this document in itself, in its present form, was never presented this way in the beginning or in our first and second reads?
Well, it wasn't presented this way because, again, this was something that we created to change methods. But feeling rushed, it just happens to be like that in our implementation calendar. And I would also really like the full board to be able to have conversations about this. I wanted it to be heard last committee meeting. It just didn't happen. So it's not something that we intentionally rushed. It just played out that way because of the way the committee meetings were set up.
But you also just stated you were rushed.
I said it feels rushed. And I think I also want to go back to our retreat meeting. And I feel like most board members feel this way. We did not have enough time in the retreat for as much discussion as we would have liked for the governance manual. That was part of the ad hoc's intention, was to have a longer discussion at that retreat. And that's something that our coach also mentioned too, is that that would have been a better place to have more of that conversation for that first time that we all got together. That also just didn't happen. So I share your sentiment of it feels like it's a lot, but we also have deadlines and processes that I want to agree with, especially because I'm going on leave. So that's one of my things too, is I want to be able to be involved in these processes while I'm here.
Well, and you know, the question too, just to the December 21st, if it was critical that we were to review what the ad hoc was putting together, why wasn't that conversation held with Ashley for that whole agenda on the 21st?
Well, it was on the agenda. It just wasn't as much time as we had liked. So,
Well, and I think that's at the
and that's
cost
not
of
something,
whatever.
that's not something that we did as board members, right?
Well,
That was,
see, but that's where the conversations break down. And if it's, you know, and I'm trying to understand what the Council of Great City Schools presenting and doing what they were doing. I just don't understand why you guys were cut off and put at the end, and that wasn't definitely decided on. But I don't think it should be at the cost of us not being able to read and do what we needed to do in a timely manner.
mm-hmm.
And I don't know why we're cutting that time, because if it was if the Council of Great City Schools took away that time, I think that needs to be stated that we shouldn't be penalized to get this done and get it to a vote when they should have gave us that time in the beginning.
I see you came off mute, Board Member Jackson.
Yeah, I wanted to, in regards to the retreat, I think that the point of the retreat was twofold, right? Like there were a couple of agenda items on there, and part of it was just a reiteration of SOFG, and was that board member request of, can we have like a reminder or a primer on you know, board responsibilities as it relates to student outcomes focused governance. And I think whether intentional or not, that discussion went longer than intended. And that is why the board governance manual discussion just got pushed to the end. I don't think it was intentional on anybody's part. It's just that the first part of the agenda, the discussion just went a little bit longer.
Well, and Board Member Jackson, I'm going to disagree because I feel if this was an important matter, that discussion should have been held with Ashley so that we could have had that time and did what's needed. Now, like I said before, I feel like we're paying the price because now we have a deadline to meet and we have all of these other things and we're rushing this, when that meeting should have solely been intended for us to discuss this matter. And I don't know why it was not the focus.
So I'm going to thank you, Member Tomarito.
Okay. Thank you.
I appreciate the points that you are making. Board Member Benavides, did you?
I just want to say one last thing. It
Okay.
sounds like we all could have used a little more time management in this process. And if we didn't take the first few steps and talk about the proposed changes the way we should have, we did have a policy meeting wherein we could have done this. And we decided that the meeting was only going to be an hour long and we didn't get to it. And we didn't also ask at the end of that meeting, because this work is so important, nobody brought it up and said, can we extend this meeting because we really need to get to this? We knew what the implementation timeline was. We knew this was going to be on the agenda for this week. So this is a lesson in time management I think we all can take, and hopefully we can learn from that.
Thank you. And so I'm going to make my comments. I don't expect a response, but I am concerned when I hear that that the discussion was here at the policy committee that there was as much discussion, that phrase, there wasn't as much discussion as we would have liked at the 20th December workshop. I want to be really clear. We have not had any discussion about any of the amendments. And what I have heard, so first of all, that means that we do not have a first read yet, because the first meeting, and I'm reading from what I want to point out, finally, a clean copy in its 8th form, because I have 8 copies of this manual that the ad hoc committee has worked hard on. I don't dismiss how hard you have worked on it. But everything that followed from the December 20th meeting has been for naught, because we cannot in good conscience say that we have had a first meeting. It says here, the proposal will be presented as a discussion item along with any objectives or rationale for the proposed policy and how it satisfies the board's identified scope. Number 2, under first meeting, once reviewed by the policy committee, the proposed new policy will be made available for public review and comment for 30 days or until the next regularly scheduled policy committee meeting. The public comment period will provide an opportunity for formal public feedback to inform potential changes to the proposed policy. That has not been, we have not had this clean copy for 30 days, nor has the public. And I would argue that this becomes super important in this election year because it sends a message about what the expectations are and what our values are. And I have taken issue with much of the language, particularly in 4G. And I also want to just point out that we made agreements back in November. What strategy should the ad hoc committee use to solicit feedback? We settled on a survey. The second piece was, I will feel that this has been a fair and inclusive process if I can be included as much as I want to be, as long as everyone is heard equally. And I don't feel like I have been heard equally. I did provide very specific language in on the survey. And I want to remind everybody, we were told that the first 2 questions were the most important, that everything that followed was optional. Those were the coach's words. There was never any mention about specific language. The questions were suggestions. Offer your suggestions. And so I offered, we're missing meaningful tribal consultation policy language. The board president authority, revisit to clarify and or change at least 2 responsibilities. The appointment of APS board members to outside board of directors, such as NMSBA, Council of Great City Schools. These should be voted on by the entire APS board. That's pretty specific. The APS board member representative to these outside boards should articulate and vote the will of the APS board, not the will of one particular officer. That's pretty specific. APS voting members should allow judicious temperament in representing the APS Board of Education, should practice the student outcomes tenets of resolving questions and or conflicts before accessing a lawyer, should be available to all board members. Oh, sorry, that was two different specific languages. Restorative practices, mediators should be used for conflict resolution. I mentioned that the community engagement and outreach with the targeted populations of the Martinez and Yazzie community must be improved. So I don't feel heard. And so I think if we had had time to truly discuss on December 20th, we could have hashed these out and clarified the process. And I'm with Board Member Tom Warito. I think you put it well. We are paying the price for poor coaching. And it really does call into question the professionalism and ability of the council to help this board. And that's all I'm going to say. I don't think we need to, I don't expect an answer tonight.
I would like to respond, Board Member Dominguez. Just to
Okay.
make it very clear, because I don't want anybody to feel like they were left out of this process at all. And I'm willing to meet with any board member who would like to go over how we move this process forward and the survey results, and any other thing. And I will say that specifically to a lot of the points that you mentioned, as you were speaking, which I appreciate, thank you for that. What we did is anything that was concrete from the survey results that gave us suggestions went into that first page or governance manual packet that you all got. So specifically, a lot of your answers said in process. You had nothing that was specific that I could implement, and we can go through that. If there was time that first meeting in January to go over the other suggestions that you did give in the governance manual, you would see that they are reflected in not only that full governance manual with a lot of edits, but also a lot of them are reflected in the suggestions. So the tribal consultation, the changing of the goals and adding language, those are reflected. So I wanted to make clear that we tried our best to make sure everybody's input was there. And there was different processes that it went through. Again, if we would have been able to discuss this, you would have seen that in a different light. So I share your sentiment that this probably didn't go as we wanted it to go and not as planned, so that everybody feels included. But the process that we used definitely was. And again, I'm willing to meet with any board member who feels like they weren't heard to make sure that they know that their voice was implemented.
And I want to recognize what you just said. You know, when you and I met after the last board policy committee meeting on the 23rd, that discussion, those items those changes are reflected. But what I just read from was the specifics here. These were registered on the survey. I downloaded and printed the survey. And so this was, this is dating back to December 6th. I had specific language. It was in the first two categories, which again, our coach told us you don't have to go beyond the first two questions. Everything else is optional. So because I was limited on time and wanting to submit something, what I chose to do was put my specific language under the second question. The board's overall, in terms of the board's overall governing manual, what do you think are the three weakest aspects of the manual? That's where I chose to put my specifics. And I understand that you have been put in a difficult situation. But I agree that we, the APS Board of Education, should not pay the price for poor coaching, poor guidance. And that is in fact what is happening. And I'm very concerned about it all, because it put you in a bad situation, but it certainly most definitely puts this governance manual in a terrible situation. And one more thing, and then I'll bring it to a rest. If we're going to demand that restorative practices be implemented in APS, if we ask that of teachers, of students, of administrators, then we most certainly, as a board, should be practicing the same thing. And so I promised that this would be short and sweet, and Board Member Benavides, you asked to keep it to 10 minutes. We are at 8:25, which is well over 10 minutes. And Board Member Jackson, I will recognize you, but I'll give you 1 minute to make a statement.
Thank you so much. I just want to commend Board Member Astorga for taking the reins on that discussion. I appreciate her succinct analysis of our process. And I do feel there is an underlying belief that not all of the board members' survey results and/or suggestions were incorporated. And I want to publicly state here, and I will do it again on Wednesday, that we were thorough, we were honest, we took the suggestions as they were given to us. And had we had the opportunity at the last policy meeting to get into the full discussion on the governance manual, had we planned to do, I think that a lot of the concerns that you are addressing tonight could have been alleviated, but we were not given that opportunity. To Board Member Benavides' point, we probably should have recognized that and asked that we continue that discussion at the policy meeting. We didn't. But the truth is we as a board made a decision back in November that we wanted the governance manual done now. And so that's what we're going to do. We're going to have the discussion and then we're going to move forward. So I just want to clarify, we were very honest,
yes,
and very forthright. I don't want to be cut off with that. I don't think that that's fair. You're making an accusation, and we put our best effort forward in the 2 reviews that we did as an ad hoc committee for this governance manual. And I will state the exact same thing that Board Member Astorga said. If anybody has questions about why something was in there or not, please ask me. I would be happy to have that conversation.
thank you. And so, I'm going to move on to the chair report. The action items approved at today or at today's meeting will be on the consent agenda for the March 5th Board of Education meeting. The governance manual discussion prepares us to vote on the manual at the Board of Education. Well, we did not have a board or a policy committee discussion, and so it's questionable whether we are prepared, but we will end up voting on the manual at the Board of Education meeting this Wednesday, February 5th. We will not meet in March due to the legislative session. Our poor policy analyst and superintendent are stretched thin these days. I do want to circle back to my first point. The action items approved today will be on the consent agenda for March 5th. Board of Education meeting. And so policy analyst, is this considered the second read? Have these been posted on the website for 30 days for others to look at, for the public to look at? Or will that come?
Chair Dominguez, I think that
Yes.
we already discussed that. Member Astorga explained that because this is board policy and not APS policy, that the way I understood it is it doesn't necessarily need to be
Okay,
evaluated
the
by the
policy
public.
diet, that's right, the policy diet approvals were,
Oh, okay, I'm
We'll go
sorry.
with
I thought you were
consent.
talking about the governance manual. I apologize.
oh, no. I'm talking about, so policy analyst, I need your help here. And, or Dr. Albright. So in the next 30 days, will that count as the public feedback period?
If pending, Madam Chair, pending approval of proposed revisions tomorrow at the board meeting, it could be posted for 30 days for public comment, yes.
Are we talking about the policy diet approvals tonight?
No, the remainder of the policy diet can be archived and moved on.
Okay, so that doesn't require a second read or a third, that's a separate issue, right?
Correct.
But the RFI amendments,
You are correct. The RFI is a brand new policy, should be posted for 30 days for public review.
okay, so very good. So I just want that clearly stated for the public. As far as the governance manual edits, the clean copy is available for viewing. And for the next 2 days. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you. And so with that, the next policy meeting will be Monday, April 7th at 5:15 virtually, and you can watch on the APS Board of Education YouTube channel. And with that, we are adjourned. Thank you. And good